why does there have to be God at the end of every line? Why not simply could it be an accident or a biological or a physiological event that happened and caused all of this? And yes, Dr. Hawkins may be right, it may just come back and expand and come back and expand. But why does that have to come from somewhere? Why does God have to exist within all this?
Sorry. Sorry, I'm going to go back. If anyone in the panel, in the floor, does have a question, then we ask them to respect the rules of debating and the rules of anyone that has a question, please stick your hand up, and you will have an opportunity to express your opinion. So if we can just adhere to the rules of a debate, then it makes my life and everyone's life a lot easier. Right, okay. What I'll do is I'll pose a question, or I don't know, should I pose a question or leave it to everyone to pose a question? I think I'll leave it to you guys first of all, and then. Does anyone have a question? So we'll just define the name. We'll put the names through again, so everyone would know. It's Afghan and Sharif. Sorry. Yeah. So yeah, I know. It's just yeah.
Saying no case positivity. I've got some atheist friends who celebrate Christmas, who celebrate Easter. I want to go to church with all Christians. Okay, so if there's no, they believe there's no God, who do they think? And you yourself, have had any problem of Christmas celebration, go to a party, when you choose to get married, you go to the registry office or the future partner happens to be a Christian, so I'll profess to have in a church. You say, sorry, I'm a Christian church.
I think we'll take one more question and then. Sorry. Again, hands up if anyone has a question. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead. Who was it? Yeah. So could you just elaborate on that again? Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
So I'd like to respond to the two girls and then first, and then we'll come back to your question. In response to the computer, I see that the computers are an inanimate object. Nobody has to create a bunny rabbit, they're born. I mean, you could say that your mother created you, and then it's like you get back to the first humans, and then you get back and back and back, and it's that sort of thing. You get back to single cell organisms that have gone through the process of evolution, and then you get back to there being no life on this planet. But why does it have to go back to God then? Why do you have to have God as the explanation? Why can there not be another explanation? Do you see what I mean when I say, okay, say God did create this, you created God, why is God exempt from that question? Sorry, I know you're quite young, so I'm not going to sort of follow that one on.
Yeah. Okay.
But I put that to maybe the adults in the room. In response to the emotions, no, it's all right. In response to the emotions, I see chemical reactions in the brain that cause certain things. There are sociopaths that don't feel any emotions, and that's because part of the brain isn't working. And you can distinctively look at them and say, well, they don't have any emotions, so why does everybody else on the planet have emotions and they don't? It's because the electrical neurons in their brain don't work properly. There's no communication between that part of the brain and the two hemispheres of the brain. Christmas, I'm forced to celebrate. My family's Catholic.
Well, you're not forced to.
I am forced to. If you ever tried to go against what your mother's told you to do, that's the only response I can give to that question. In order to keep my mother happy, I did it because I care about my mother. Family dynamics are personal to the person.
Maybe try and answer some of the points. First point is this, is that you always find that certain arguments always become repetitive or themes with people who don't believe in God. One of the arguments is, look, I'm only going to believe in something I can see. If I can't see it, if I can't test it, I'm not going to believe in it. Now, there are certain problems with that argument. You quoted David Hume. David Hume, who's an empiricist who believes in this process, he said, because you can't see causality, therefore causality doesn't exist. Because you can maybe strike a match and it produces fire, but how do you know that striking of the match will produce the fire? Because it's a future event, and future events are not sensed by definition. So therefore he came to the conclusion that causality doesn't exist. So if you want to go and follow this process, we can follow it to its logical conclusion and say, well, we can't prove causality. A second example would be history. Historical events, by definition now, have passed us. We can't sense it directly anymore because it is beyond our sense capacity. All we can do is infer from what we have sensed. So maybe we have an object which we have sensed is very, very old, or an old painting, and we'll infer. Similarly, if I had a painting before me, even though I've not sensed the painter, I can sense the existence of the painter from the painting. It's not an empirical process, it's what's termed a rational process. So there's many things in life that we use on a rational basis which doesn't require us to sense things. What the little sister was trying to explain is that, look, there's an infinite regression. If you don't accept that things require initiation, you have to accept there's an infinite regression. Either that, or you accept that things just popped into existence from nothing. So those are the two possibilities that you have to accept. The reason why I said it's upon you to prove the onus is because I said an infinite regression is impossible. And I gave an analogy to why it was impossible. The soldier on the battlefield, or the dominoes analogy. I said, therefore you must have, if you've got something which must exist prior to another thing, you must have an initiation point for that chain of events. Otherwise, none of the events would exist in its first place.
But what about the initiation point for God?
Right.
This is it. I see the infinite regression, and I see the point that you've got two sides of this argument. You've got an infinite point here, that all reality that we can see, that we can touch, and we can feel. And then you've got infinite, and in the middle you've got God. But you don't explain where God's come from, what God is. And you've got to make rational assumptions about God to be able to say whether it exists or not. You cannot just have a theory of something and not then explain it. Then when you explain it, you can apply it to the world, and then you can disprove it. But when you can't see something, when you can't touch something, why should the person that says it doesn't exist have to prove it? In science, it's the person that says this exists that has to prove it. So quantum theory, they had to prove it. If they've gone and sat down and said to a whole lot of scientists, this is what I think, they'd have laughed at them. They have to take proof, they have to take evidence. It is up to the person, it's up to the person who's implying something that requires a leap of faith on other people's parts to explain and show and give evidence for.
But did you not accept the point that not everything we believe in is requiring this process of science? So I gave the example of history, historical events. I gave the example of future events. I also gave the example of causality, all of which can't be proved by science, but all of which we believe in. So for example, let's take science fundamentally. What is science? Science is you've got aim, hypothesis, method, results, conclusion. This is what they term empiricism. In that process, what do? You isolate a variable, you test it at various conditions, and you record the various effects. When it comes to the issue of science as a result, it's built upon a premise, an unprovable premise, The unprovable premise is causality.